Hey, okay, third video. So my thoughts on having just read out the last two articles of the semester from spring 2016. What are my thoughts on it? I don't think this isn't gonna be as long as my first round of thoughts about it, about the first 5 articles that I read out, but yeah, maybe under 10 minutes, hopefully. I always say that, and I always do that with when I'm journaling and stuff too. I'm like, oh, this won't be long, and then it's ginormous, and I'm like, oh, I guess it was. But what do I think about it? I think the responsibilities one was pretty positive. The responsibilities article was a lot more positive and a lot more recovery based, and me talking about what I've learned and how things have changed in my life over time, which is pretty cool and pretty accurate. The one before that was the self-love one. That's pretty good. It's a pretty good article. I read a lot of different articles in the fall semester, so that's going to be really interesting to read, because I talk more about what it's like inside a psychiatric hospital in my own experiences, suicide prevention for Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, which is in September. I talked about I felt like I talked more about suicide than I actually wound up talking about suicide. But I started a series that's called Say the Word Suicide, which is about how to help someone who's suicidal, pretty much, and how to talk to them about it. And I'm still continuing that series into spring 2017, so that's cool. And I also have a whole bunch of ideas for spring 2017, which will be more recovery based again, so that's good. Yeah, those are pretty much my thoughts. I don't really have too many thoughts about it. I would say responsible Raquel is no longer the term that I use. I use the term recovery Raquel. I like that term a lot better. And I don't really use resentful Raquel anymore, although she's still definitely around. Recovery Raquel, though, I like that a lot more. Yeah. And that you can tell from the self-care cards and stuff that I've already read out, and from those other videos. Yeah, I'm probably gonna power through a couple more articles so that I can get them done. And I remember I did a huge a 3-part series in the fall. I actually had it up. It's my story of suicidality and self-harm. It's very explicit, so I'll warn that now. But I did that for 3 articles and stuff in the paper, because I was I was like, oh, I already wrote that, so I might as well just put it in the paper and stuff too. So that's up also on artissurvival.com, which is a friend of mine's nonprofit organization where they do different themes about mental health and trauma each month. And people can submit their stories anonymously or with their name on it, whatever they so choose, and they can choose an artist to make them a painting that they get sent to them. And it's worldwide too, so anyone can do it. I'll link that when it comes to that series. And yeah. And then I also just talk about a lot of resources that are on campus, which of course are different for you guys, but I won't include numbers and locations really, because that's not helpful for you people. But I always include the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So that, and what else? What else did I write about? I think that's pretty much all I wrote about, was a lot of suicide prevention kind of stuff. I think it was good that in the responsibilities one that I just read out, that I talked about my mistakes and faults and such. So that's good, just accountability, really. Just be like, yeah, I did these things, but I'm still in recovery regardless, which is good. Because I think, I mean, I cover the summer issue, like in the fall semester. I cover what I did over the summer, because May was the month I wound up making my blog during finals, and this YouTube channel was created during my finals in the fall of 2016. So there was a commonality. I hope I don't make any new accounts next year in any time during finals. Next year is my last year though, so I'm going to be officially a senior, which is exciting. It's just kind of like, I'm hoping I'll find out about a job opportunity within the next couple of months in the new year, so that will be interesting. And then I'll be happy to get my degree, because I'll finally be able to try to become a mental health specialist at a nearby hospitalization center. So that would be awesome, so that I can get in some work before I go on for my master's to become a licensed clinical social worker. So it all works out, hopefully. So yeah. And I didn't actually wind up doing the hotline thing. I still want to. That might be something I explore next year. It might be something I have to wait on for a little while. But yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. I think I can handle people being suicidal online a lot better than I can handle it in real life. Although I'm always kind of like in that situation where, like, whenever I see people like kind of like being like, whenever I tend to project onto other people, so I project my own suicidality onto other people. So if I see someone leaning over a railing, I'm like, oh my god, they're gonna jump, and that might not be what they're doing at all. But in my head, I'm like, oh my god, they're gonna jump, they're suicidal, I need to like save them, pretty much. And I do that with like people on the train platforms and stuff too. When I see someone who's like kind of bouncing back and forth a little bit and looking around for the train, like I assume that they're going to jump and are going to try to kill themselves. And so in my response, I tend to be like, I go up to them like an idiot probably, and I'm like, hey, are you okay? And they'll be like, yeah, I'm fine. And I'm like, oh, okay, I just wanted to check. I just wasn't sure, you look like you might be upset, that kind of thing. I haven't had anyone be like, yeah, I'm suicidal, which I hope that they would be able to do, because I feel like when I'm around people that I assume are suicidal, I tend to think like, not on my watch, like, you don't die today, not while I'm around. And that's probably over responsibility with OCD, really. But I wouldn't want anyone to hurt themselves, like, especially like if I was nearby, just because as someone who's been through it, like, I feel like someone who could really listen and just let them vent, and then help them get to where they need to go to get help. So I would just hate to be around, like, I would hate to hear or see that happen and not be able to do very much. And I know with suicide it's a lot more complicated, because in a way you have to accept that you can't control what other people will do. I can't control someone else's actions, I can only control my own. So in that way, I have to kind of accept that someone else may wind up killing themselves, and it's not my fault, and I'm not at fault for that. And as a civilian, in a sense, or as a friend, like, that's not my fault, that's not my place. It's obviously a little bit more complicated if you're a professional, with that kind of thing, but I guess it's just complicated and hard, but it's not the fault of like, oh, I didn't see it coming, or a lot of times it's, you know, it's just complicated, I guess. This is totally getting to 10 minutes. I could talk about that in another video, definitely. I don't have my words succinctly in my head, so I don't want to say the wrong thing. Which, I mean, I feel like when it comes to people who are suicidal, like, a lot of the time that I've had people who talk to me about it who haven't experienced suicidality themselves, and you can kind of tell who it is that hasn't experienced it and who has, by the way that they talk about it. Because I've had people project onto me their own like uncertainties or values or whatever. Like if somebody is like, oh well, you know, just go to God and seek help from religion and stuff like that, and that's okay. Like it's like, you know, okay, sure, like I can get that. Like I can how do I want to say this? I can understand the gesture. I appreciate the gesture. It's not helpful for me. Like, religion isn't helpful for me. Some people it works, and that's great, and that's fine. You do you. Keep doing that. But, like, approaching it like, oh, that's a sin, like, suicide's a sin, like, you shouldn't do that, you're selfish, or whatever, that's definitely not the time. And if a person is in a suicidal crisis, that is not the time to have that discussion. If a person is in a suicidal crisis, they need help immediately and need to go to the hospital. Like, trying to lecture them during that, or yell at them, or anything like that, and be judgmental about it, not the time for that. You can do that later if you want, which I wouldn't suggest anyway because it's not helpful, but if you want to do that later, do it later when they're still alive. Don't do it when they're threatening or are telling you, I'm suicidal, I want to die. That's not the time to do it. Like, it's just, I've never had someone tell me that. Like, I haven't had someone be like, oh, you know, oh, that's so selfish, or like, oh, you know, why would you... I mean, I've had people ask me, like, why I would want to kill myself kind of thing, and that's more of, like, a trying to understand like, where I'm coming from kind of thing. But I've never had a bad reaction to it. I've just had people who come from a place where they're trying to help me, but they do it in a way that isn't helpful. But I appreciate the gesture. And I can just kind of be like, oh yeah, that's your stuff, but I appreciate, thank you for saying so. Thank you for trying. You tried. I give you bonus points for trying. It's not helpful, but you tried, and I think saying something is, in a way, depending on how it's said, because I think how it's said matters a lot too, and the lighting is like fading out of here. Hold on, let me turn the light on. I think that should be a bit better, yeah. So, like, how it's said matters too. Like, I've had people tell me, like, oh, depression isn't, like, for me, with the secondary depression, it's kind of getting more into a vlog kind of style. I guess I just need a vent. But for me, like, I can be depressed. I can be, like, severely depressed at, like, 10 a.m., right? And then by 11 a.m., I'm all good. And I've had people in my life who tell me, like, oh, depression is either you're severely depressed and you can't function at all, or you're not depressed at all, and you're okay. And it's like, that's not how it works. Like, there's a spectrum within those two extremes. And I hate when that happens, because, like, the person in my life who will tell me that will be it'll be very triggering for me, because then I get like, oh, am I not depressed? Am I depressed? I don't know. And then I have doubt about whether I'm experiencing pain that is valid and intense, which it is. And because for me, depression is never like, I'm never idle about it. I'm never like, oh, I'm just gonna sit with depression and, you know, waste away the next 5 days or something. I don't know. Not that it's a choice either. I'm not saying that. But I would be like, oh, here's depression again. You know what? I'm gonna go kill myself. Here's a plan. I have a plan. I'm gonna go act on it. I move quickly, pretty much. I don't sit with depression very long. I wind up acting on my thoughts, which is dangerous. Understandably why I've been hospitalized so many times, and the amount of times I've attempted suicide. But I guess just, like, there's a way in how to say it, but I think that saying nothing at all can be as bad as saying it in a bad way as well. Like telling someone who's suicidal, oh, just get happy, or just, you know, telling them to go kill themselves either, like, what are you doing? Like, genuinely, what the fuck are you doing? Which I imagine doesn't happen very much. It probably happens more on the internet than it does in real life. But there are people actually out there who do encourage other people to kill themselves and, like, prompt them in a way that is illegal, I think, in most cases, and just an asshole, really. I'm getting so off topic. But these are just some of my thoughts. They're pretty unfiltered, and I'm probably not saying them all the way that I want them to be said, so just take that with a grain of salt. But I think that there are times where saying nothing can be as bad as saying the wrong thing. So instead of being afraid of saying the wrong thing, you know, look it up a little bit, Google it. There are plenty of websites out there. There are hotlines you can call, text lines, things like that you can find out resources and information on how to talk to someone who in your life is suicidal, or someone you just met online, or someone in just a random stranger kind of thing. I think a lot of people don't understand it, and a lot of people are ignorant, and some people are rude and crude about it. But it all comes back from, like, what are their own experiences. Maybe they lost someone to suicide. Maybe, you know, they've been through it themselves and have taken a different kind of approach to it. Not everybody takes the approach of kindness and compassion and empathy. Some people take a more, you know, malice and hard, you know, tough love kind of approach to it. And those approaches, it depends on the person as well, because the person on the receiving end of that, they might be good with tough love, or they might need compassion and understanding. So it all depends. Everything is different. No one thing works for everyone, pretty much. But suicide is something that goes across. It's a worldwide issue. It's not just in the US, it's across the world. I wouldn't be surprised if it's universal, like outside of this universe and into a different one, if you believe in those kinds of things. It's a universal issue, it's a worldwide problem, and people are just dying by it increasingly. And it's a problem that people need to start talking about, and that's, you know, part of why I talk about it, is that I really do believe, and I've said it already, but I really do believe that silence kills. I mean, if I know for me, if I were silent about my suicidal ideation and my suicidal thoughts, stuff like that, I likely would be either severely injured or dead. Because, like, the worst thing, for me, at least, in my opinion, in my experiences, the worst thing is for me to be upset in public or anywhere, and for people to potentially notice. Maybe they notice, maybe they don't, I don't know, but they walk by and they don't do anything. Like, if I were sitting on a ledge, I can just imagine, like, people just not doing anything about it and not saying anything, and that sucks. Like, it sucks more for me when people don't acknowledge it, because I'm usually at the point where I'm so suicidal that I can't acknowledge my own pain, and that I can't acknowledge that what I'm dealing with is serious, and that I need immediate intervention. Like, I usually can't acknowledge that, and so I rely on other people to be like, yo, I see where you're at, you're not in a good place, I understand that, let's go get help. Like, that's what I need in people. But sometimes that doesn't happen, and sometimes it's just ignored or pushed under the rug, or people just walk by and don't ask or don't do whatever, and that's not their responsibility either. But it's just, I know for me at least, when I see someone who I think is upset, I go up and ask them if they're okay, because I know what it's like to be on that side of being upset and being in public or whatever it is, and people not listening, not looking, not listening, not coming by, whatever. So that's something that I practice, at least. If I see someone upset, I go and ask them if they're okay. And they might be fine. And that's happened before. Like, I just, maybe I was overreading something, I don't know. But sometimes I've tried to put it into perspective of, like, I think that's how I look when I'm upset, so I'm gonna ask them if they're okay. And I've given out, I tend to give out my number and stuff to people, and, like, or an email address or whatever, like, hey, if you need to talk, here's my contact, like, if you ever want to talk, if you ever need to, whatever. That's just what I do. That might not be the safest thing to do, or the smartest thing to do, maybe, but I read an article once that talked about someone who helped someone who was suicidal because they were going to jump off of something, and this random stranger spoke to them, and they shared contact information, and the guy went and got help, and then for a few years afterward, they actually kept in contact, and eventually they stopped communicating, the person moved, something happened, whatever, but they still, like, they made an article, like, writing about it, and I thought that was awesome, and that's just so fantastic, I think, to just show more compassion and humanity in a suicidal crisis, whoever is suicidal, that's, sometimes we just need people to be like, hey, what you're going through sucks, and it's shit, and I see that you're going through it. How can I help you? Like, that's awesome. Sometimes for me, that's often what I need. I just need someone to not give me advice, but just listen, just be there as I vent. This went in a really weird direction. Very, very weird direction. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. Don't take too much of what I said I don't even know if I'm gonna keep this. I might, just a vlog. Here's my thoughts about stuff. Just raw. Yeah. Well, 20 minutes later. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go back up to my room, probably. Although I shouldn't. And I'm gonna make a couple other videos of articles. So, yeah. Bye-bye. Also, by the way, side note, I sprayed some perfume on myself, and it smells really good. So I'm kind of like, just wafting in the smell. It's very nice. Very nice. This lighting is terrible. Curse you, getting dark at 4.